डिजिट इंश्योरेंस ने कवर किए हैं करोड़ों बाइक्स एंड स्कूटर्स विद हजारों कैशलेस गराजेस ऑल ओवर इंडिया।
Do the digit dance, do the digit for your bike insurance.
आप भी डिजिट को चुनें, सर्च करें डिजिट बाइक इंश्योरेंस और अपनी बाइक इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी तुरंत रिन्यू करें।
Dear colleagues, I'm happy to greet you at the 20th event, Valdai International Discussion Club, and our President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, is taking part in this discussion. Mr. President, we have the 20th meeting, so it's Valdai is 19 years old, and this meeting is the 20th meeting. Happens like this, and when we look at the archives, then we have this impression that this is chronicles of the change of times. It's very important to us that all these 20 out of these 20 events, I don't think you ever missed one. You always met with Valdai colleagues. We have people in the audience who met with you right at the beginning, and those who see you for the first time. And I'm very happy to give you the floor to present your opinion today. Thank you very much, dear participants of the plenary session, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to greet you here at Sochi at the milestone 20th meeting of the International Discussion Club Valdai. Your forum traditionally gathered politicians and scientists, experts and activists from many parts of the world, and this emphasizes that this is a very popular platform. Discussion is always the reflection of important trends of the politics of the 21st century, and I'm sure that this tradition will continue. This will be done today, and this will continue. So we have the objective of creating a new world, and there are defining moments, defining stages, and we need intellectuals like you, and the role of you as intellectuals is great. Within this club and within the country, we have seen colossal changes. In historical terms, 20 years is a short period of time. However, when we see all these structural changes in the world, we see that the time is so to say, being compressed. And we see that such events usually happen over a number of decades. And we see that these are fundamental changes, the changes that require the change in the principles of international relations. We see that at the beginning of the 20th century, we saw that there was ideological and military confrontation between the countries, and the world community felt that we have a very fragile, this is a very fragile area, this international cooperation. And when you ignore the real challenges, this inevitably leads us to a dead end. Also, the attempt of the powerful to force others to follow their will is always a mistake. And we thought that this was obvious, but it turned out that it wasn't as obvious. When we met about 20 years ago at this discussion club, our country was entering a new a era in its development. We were coming out of a very difficult period after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and we have engaged in creation creation of a new, as we thought, more fairer world. And we were working with our partners and friends. Unfortunately, our readiness for a constructive cooperation was misunderstood by many. They understood this as submission. They understood that the new world order will be built by those who declared themselves winners in the Cold War. They thought that Russia was ready to follow in somebody else's current, that we would guide ourselves by foreign interests, not our own interests. And it's clear that this misunderstanding, we were saying that this misunderstanding would lead to a conflict and possibly a military conflict, but nobody wanted to listen. You know that arrogance of our Western partners was beyond everything. So US has taken the course for hegemony, political, cultural, and even in terms of values. We understood right from the start that these attempts to establish a monopoly were doomed. The world is too diverse for it to be able to be subjected to somebody's will, even taking the power, the major power of the West that was accumulated through colonial policy. We see that a lot of your colleagues are not here, but they are not denying the fact that the wealth of the West was achieved through colonies. This is a fact. This level of development was achieved in many respects through robbing the rest of the planet. And you see that in the West there's a history of constant conquest, and it's a financial and military pyramid. They are subjugating somebody else's resources, human resources, natural resources, and so on. Our arguments calling for common sense, our proposals were simply ignored, and I spoke about this publicly. I said to our partners. You remember when I said that I proposed for us to enter NATO, and they said no, NATO doesn't need a country like this. And we said, oh, we thought that we are theirs, that we are one of them. There's no confrontation. What was the problem? The problem was that the arrogance and the conflict of geopolitical interests is the arrogance. Constant growth of political pressure and the military pressure had to be responded to. I said many times that we did not start the so-called war in Ukraine. No, we're trying to end this war. It wasn't us who started the military coup in 2014 in Kiev, the state bloody anti-constitutional coup. Wherever this happens, we see that we see the money that comes from the Anglo-Saxon world. It's Anglo-Saxon, it's anti-democratic, and they even announced the amount of money they spent on this. And we were supporting the Crimeans and those who live in Sevastopol. We were not trying to create this coup. We were not trying to threaten those who are in Crimea with ethnic cleansing. It wasn't us who were threatening bombing of Donbass. It wasn't us who were not allowing people to speak in their own mother tongue. persuaded of millions of people who perceive the reality through media. And they have been conducting this war over a number of years against Donbass, and nobody was counting dead children in Donbass over these years. Nobody in other countries, especially in the West, was crying about those who were dead, who died in this war. The war that was started by the Kiev regime with the support of the West, what was started by the West, and the special military operation was begun in order to end that war. And unilateral steps, whoever takes them, unilateral steps will always see a response. Action always leads to reaction. Any responsible state behaves in this way. A sovereign, independent state that respects itself. Everyone.
Whenever I had ice cream or cold water, I would experience a sharp shooting sensation, so I just kept ignoring it. Even my hot chai was giving me the same amount of discomfort. My dentist recommended Sensodyne, so now I can be completely carefree and sip my hot cup of tea. It really works.
Is aware that in international system where chaos prevails, where some parties declare themselves unilaterally right, and where the hegemon reserves the right to attack any country if it goes against its interests, we have to state that our counterparties in the West have lost the sense of reality, and they've crossed any borders. And I would like to say that this conflict in Ukraine is not a territorial conflict. Russia is the largest country in the world in terms of territory. We don't have any interest in terms of conquering any new territories. We've got a lot of lands to develop in Siberia and Far East. So this is not a territorial conflict. And it's not even about establishing a geopolitical balance in this region. It's a much more bigger issue. It's the principles about of international relations. It's about understanding that there is an equilibrium in the world, that nobody is able to force unilaterally others to live in accordance with the hegemon's will. And in this context, any notion of sovereignty is simply rejected. The desire to bring the world into a state of constant conflict, they are just following the legacy of the 20th century and its most aggressive instances. The West always needs an enemy, or a part of the Western elites. They need an enemy, and they can always explain their desire for expansion through the existence of that enemy. And they also need that external enemy to control the blocks, within the blocks, for internal control of the society. Whenever there's an enemy, everyone has to come together around the boss. It's not our business how other countries live. We see that the ruling elite in many countries forces citizens to accept the values, and in certain countries we see that majority of citizens refuse to accept these values, but they're forced to, and they constantly invent external reasons for this. They say that there are enemies, and they blow up existing threats. And Russia is a beloved topic for these politicians. The image of the enemy is attached to anyone who is not prepared to follow these Western elites. They can attach that image to China, In certain situations, they attach this to India, and they, of course, now they're trying to play with India to work with India because they see that there's a change in tide, and we see that India is very nationally oriented, and we know that these attempts are futile. They're also trying to create an enemy out of the Arab world, also selectively. They're trying to be careful there. Nevertheless, this is what it boils down to. And even they try to create enemies out of Muslims as in general. Anyone who behaves themselves in an independent manner, anyone who follows their own interests, they always turn them into an obstacle that needs to be removed. The world is, they're imposing structures, and they're creating on the world, they're creating these block format. They are trying to expand NATO in Asia and Pacific and South Asia. They are trying to break an open and inclusive infrastructure of cooperation. So these are limitations of states for their own development, and force them to take on certain obligations. So this is just a stealing of a certain part of their sovereignty, and then certain solutions or decisions are being imposed on these countries in economic sphere and in defense and so on. And we see this between the US and Europe. I don't have to explain this, but if you want me to explain it, after this introductory word, I can expand on this. They are trying to replace international law with rules or codes. What are these rules? Who are they invented by? It's unclear. This is just nonsense. They are trying to implement in the consciousness of millions of people that you have to live according to rules. What rules? And if you allow our Western colleagues, especially from the US, they are arbitrarily setting these rules, and they are also teaching others how to behave, how to follow these rules, and they are presenting it in a very brazen way. It's just this manifestation of this colonial thinking. We constantly hear that you must, you have to. We are seriously warning you. Who are you? What right do you have to warn anyone? This is surprising. Maybe those who say this, maybe you have to get rid of this arrogance and stop behaving like this towards international community. Those who understand their own interests, they understand their own rights and maybe you have to get rid of this colonial thinking. You have to understand that this age is gone and it's not coming back. This behavior has always led to the same thing: big wars. And there were always some justifications, even moral justifications for this. Today, especially, this is very dangerous because it is possible to destroy the whole planet. Manipulation of people's consciousness leads to dangers, and you have to come out of this vicious circle. And I understand that respectable colleagues, you get together here in order to find solutions. We see that our country has been characterized as indigenous civilization, and In such definition, we understand our own role in the world development. In our understanding, civilization is something that has many aspects, many facets, and there were many interpretations of our civilization. Colonial interpretation, and there's a notion of the civilized world, and somehow everyone has to follow this standard, the template, and those who disagree will be forced by a baton of an enlightened sir or enlightened master. Our understanding of civilization is completely different. First of all, there are many civilizations, and none of them is better or worse than another. They're equal because they express the desires and traditions of their own people. For every one of us, it's their own thing. For us, for me personally, it's the manifestation of the desires of the people of the culture that I was part of. Civilization, the notion of civilization is something that has got many components in it. And maybe this is not the place to describe all of this in detail, but I'll try to bring it down to connect it to what's happening in the world today. So the main characteristic of civilization is self-sufficiency. If each country is trying to develop its own way of development, and it's rooted in geography and historical experience in the ancient and modern history. This is a very complex synthesis out of which emerge the uniqueness and indigenous nature of civilization. Russia, over hundreds of years, was forming as a country of many religions and nationalities, ethnic groups. You can't bring down Russia to a common denominator, but you cannot split it either, because it exists only in its integrity. And keeping the integrity of such a state is not a simple task. Over the centuries, we had most difficult challenges, and we always overcame those challenges, sometimes paying a very dear price, strengthening our national unity and integrity of the state. Today, this experience is invaluable. We see that the world is diverse, and using simple methods of management or trying to bring everyone to the common denominator without taking into account the complexity of the whole thing is impossible. What's important to add is that truly efficient state system cannot be imposed. It can only be born in a natural way out of civilizational roots of a country, and Russia in this regard is a great example of how this happens in practice. Civilizational anchor is a necessary aspect in today's world, which lost its roots, and it's important to understand our own needs and understand the nature of connection to the outside world. And we should move away from universalism and block mentality. We are moving towards a synergy of world civilizations, of commonality of these civilizations. There cannot be one civilization for everyone. Every civilization is different from others, and it's self-sufficient, and it's It's got its roots in its own tradition and history, and out of self-respect flows respect to others, but also it deserves respect from others. We are not imposing anything on others, but we are not allowing anyone to impose anything on us. And if everyone sticks to this principle, this will allow for harmonious coexistence. This also goes for reacting to the external attacks, and what's more important is supporting internal harmony and stability. We see that international field today, field of international cooperations is very unstable today. And of course, civilization cannot be betrayed. Betrayal is also a path to chaos. We always try to propose decisions that would take into account interests of everyone, but our counterparts in the world, in the West, seem to have forgotten that things like compromise and mutual understanding actually exist. Their only intent is to force, using any means, their own interests. If this is their choice, okay, we will see what comes out of it. The paradox is that the nature of the situation may change even tomorrow. We see that there might be some changes, internal political changes after elections may occur. Today they make certain statements, but maybe tomorrow there are political changes. And then unceremoniously, then they're trying to promote some other agenda. So example of this is Iranian nuclear program. One administration was forcing through one type of solution, then came another administration, and then they rolled back on this. And how can you work in these conditions? Where are the anchors? Where are the guarantees? Are these the rules that they're talking about? Why is this all happening? Why is nobody concerned about this? It's because the world strategic thinking has been replaced by corrupt interests, not even governments, but certain groups. It's the political elites who are irresponsible, who do not have any shame and do not believe that they're responsible for anything. What we are proposing instead is long-term cooperation and principles that are not based on the current climate. Something that is rooted in history and historical development. And if everyone is guided by this, I believe that there will be much fewer conflicts in the world, and a lot of these interactions will become much more rational, because each civilization respects other civilizations, and they're not trying to impose their will on them. I've read the report that was prepared by the club for today's meeting, and it said that everyone is trying to understand the image of the future, and of course this is understandable, especially for intellectuals in the age of cardinal changes. When things are changing dramatically, we need to understand where we are going, where the world is going, and of course the future is created today in front of our eyes by our own hands. And when we see these gigantic, important processes, it's difficult to forecast the result. Whatever we do, life will introduce its own corrections. However, we need to understand what are we going towards, what are we trying to achieve, and Russia has got this understanding. First of all, we would like to live in an open, interrelated world where nobody will try to create any artificial barriers to development of any nation. It has to be a barrier-less environment. We want the diversity of the world not just to be preserved, but also encouraged. Imposing any will to another country of how to live and how to feel, it has to be forbidden. Only real cultural diversity can ensure balance of interest. Number 3, we are for maximum representation. Nobody has the right to rule anyone on behalf of somebody else. We need to see decisions to be made at the level where they are most effective, and it's only those who are interested in these decisions that need to participate in this. There cannot be one person deciding for everyone. It's those who this decision who's concerned with this decision. Those are the parties that need to be participating in creating that solution. So the interests of everyone have to be reflected. We have to free international relations from block approach, from the colonial heritage. We're talking about indivisibility of security. We are talking about the fact that you cannot ensure somebody's security at the expense of somebody else's security. We have to get rid of arrogance, complacency, and we should stop looking at others as second class citizens or second-class people. This age of exploitation is in the past. Countries and nations are clear about their capacity and their abilities. Everyone has to be ensured access to the means of self-development, and any attempt to limit this has to be considered as an aggression. We are for equality. We see that nobody wants to be subjugated, nobody wants to be dependent on anyone, nobody wants to be dependent on the richer countries, and this is quintessential. These are the principles that we want to stick to, and we are inviting everyone to follow these principles. Dear colleagues, Russia has always been and is one of the countries that is open to cooperation, and we are going to oppose very strictly to those who want to impose their will, and we believe that pragmatic approach and common sense will prevail, and multipolarity and a multipolar world will be established. And at the end, I would like to thank the organizers of the forum
for thorough, high-quality work, and I would like to express my gratitude
for your attention to every participant of this forum. Mr. President, thank you very much for such detailed explanation of general conceptual matters, because at Valdai Club and other forums, everyone is trying to understand the framework that will replace the existing framework, and we
we are quite successful at understanding at what is not going to be there, but we're not quite clear about what is going to be. And in addition, maybe as a follow-up of your presentation, this important aspect of civilizations and civilizational approach. You said a long time ago that the boundaries of Russia are not stopping anywhere. If they're not stopping anywhere, then we can't even talk about civilization, because then the civilization doesn't have any boundaries. So this was said that in a conversation with one of the state leaders of the United States in Novogorova. This was said as a joke. I'd like to again emphasize that Russia is the largest country in the world in terms of territory. But if we say seriously, we speak seriously, then of course we know that there are many Russians living all over the world, and Russian language is one of the official languages of the United Nations, and we know that in Latin America we see many thousands of Russians, and they're everywhere in Asia. So if we talk seriously in terms of civilization, of course there are no boundaries. In the same way as no other civilization has any boundaries. If you take India or China, how many representatives of China live in other countries, or Indians, and they interact very well with each other. And if this is a natural interaction, if this is a friendly interaction, if it's aimed at... So, civilization is not territory, it's people for you. That's correct. There'll be lots of questions about Ukraine, our actions in Donbass. First of all, are to do with defense of our people. Can you characterize special military operation as a civilizational conflict? You said it's not about territory. Well, I don't know what kind of civilization is being defended by those who are on the other side of the front line. We are defending our traditions, our culture, and our people.
KFC presents Crispy Days. Get up to 44% off on 9 leg pieces at just $4.99. Now every piece, leg piece. Don't miss the crispy treat.
Okay. Because we moved on to Ukraine straight away. I think in Spain they have a large event. Vladimir Zelensky went there, and a number of other important people went there. They're discussing the question of continued support of Ukraine. We know that there's a situation in United States where there's a bit of a delay because of the crisis in Congress, and Europe is thinking that then maybe they have to take on that support. What are we expecting from this? We are expecting at least some signs of common sense in terms of whether they can manage this or can't manage this. We have to ask them. I don't see any problem for them managing support. The problem is to expand the production and the amount of money that is being spent on the war and on continuation of this conflict. And they are clear to this audience. They're well known in the US. There's a little hiccup, a little glitch of technical nature, and so there's a problem with the budget, and there's a huge budget debt, and you have to balance the debt. And the question is how you balance the debt at the expense of supply of weapons to Ukraine, maybe you cut the social costs. Cutting social payments is something nobody wants to do. Because this is how opposition parties establish themselves and strengthen their position. But ultimately they'll find the money, they'll print the money. After COVID and during COVID, they printed 9.5 trillion US dollars. Wouldn't be a problem. It wouldn't be a problem for them to print more money and just spread it all over the world and create food inflation. As for Europe, the situation is a bit more complicated. In the US, we see the growth of economy. We've seen that over the last period, 2.4%. In Europe, things are much worse. In 2021, the growth was 4.9%, and this year it's going to be 0.5%, and it's at the expense of the southern countries, Spain and Italy. We spoke with an expert on this, and growth in Spain and Italy is to do with growth of prices of real estate and also tourism. And in other economies in Europe, there's a stagnation. They are in deficit in terms of production. In Germany, minus 0.1. In Estonia, I think it's -3. Holland, Austria, they've got negative trends, especially negative trends in terms of industrial production. If it's not a catastrophe, then at least it's a very, very difficult situation in terms of chemical production, metallurgical production. We know that because there are relatively cheap energy sources in the US, certain decisions of financial some of the producing companies are just moving from Europe to the US, and this is what I was alluding in my speech. So the burden on the population of European countries is growing. So this is the data from European statistics. We see that the quality of life is falling. We see that the real income is reducing by 1.5%. Can Europe support, or they can't? Yes, they can. At what expense? At the expense of further worsening economic situation and also worsening of the quality of the Europeans. But our budgets cannot be stretched indefinitely either. Are we managing? Yes, we are managing so far, and we will continue to manage. Of the second quarter, we saw the surplus of 660 billion rubles, and at the end of the year, we will have a certain deficit in the region of 1%. And in the following years, 2024-25, we are hoping to keep that deficit in the region of 1%. We've got a record low unemployment, 3%, and it's stabilized. What's very important is a key issue, maybe we'll come back to that again, but I think it's very important. Fundamental thing for our economy. Naturally, we have a structural change in our economy. We were receiving certain imported goods from European countries the same way as in 2014, when there were certain limitations imposed on purchase of certain European agricultural products. We were forced to invest in development of internal agriculture. Yes, inflation went up, but we managed to for our producers to increase the volumes. And you know today that taking all agricultural goods, we are self-sufficient completely. The same thing is happening in industry. We see that the main growth is coming from processing industry. Oil and gas income has fallen. However, it's still a 3% growth. Non-oil and gas income in processing industry is plus 43%. So this is optics, electronics. We have to do quite a lot in the area of electronics, but all of that put together, is giving us a growth of 43%. We have restructured logistics. We have got transport machine building. So we have overcome all the problems that occurred after the introduction of the sanctions against us. And we have begun a new stage of development using a completely new base. This is very important. What's important to us is to keep that trend. We do have problems, and it's to do with shortage of workforce and what follows out of this and other issues. However, we see a growth in real-term income of population. It's falling in Europe. Here we have a growth of 12.5%. So even accounting for inflation, 5.7% growth in terms of. But the bank is thinking about measures to mitigate to reduce this problem. Some people will say that this is a militarization due to militarization of the economy. Would that be correct? So we have increased costs in terms of defense, but not just defense and security.
Abhi,
My friends and I are going sightseeing.
no issue. You carry on. I'll miss you.
You want to join us?
No. I'm very busy. You go now.
Bye.
Okay, love you. My savior. The new Galaxy Z Fold 5. Look at the screen. It gives you a full immersive gaming experience. If you're a gamer and live life in the fast lane, you better get your hands on the Fold 5. With the fastest chip in the Galaxy Z series yet, I bet you'll forget your console. Yes! Sorry. I get all heated up with this guy. Never. Life's a game, and it's a win-win with the Galaxy Z Fold 5.
And they doubled approximately. It was about 3%, now it's about 6%. Defense and security. But with that, I'd like to emphasize that. I said that already, and in the third quarter we've got a surplus in terms of budget, 660 billion. And there will be some deficit at the end of the year, but it will be around 1%. And so this is quite a healthy economy, healthy budget. So to say that we are excessively spending money on cannons and we've forgotten about butter, that's not correct. I'd like to emphasize that all plans that we announced earlier, plans of achieving strategic goals and all obligations that we're taking upon the state, they are being fulfilled fully. Thank you. This is great news. Mr. President, apart from the conflict in Ukraine, we'll come back to it again. In the events of the several few days, events in Caucasus, Jean-Michel, he said that Charles Michel, the chairman of the European Council, said that Russia has betrayed Armenians. You know, we say that anyone else's cow can speak, but your cow should keep quiet, as we say. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Is it the end of the question? see what's been happening and what has happened recently. After well-known events and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we know that there was a conflict, and there were ethnic conflicts between Armenians and Azerbaijanis, and they began in Sumgait, and then they went to Karabakh, and it has led to a situation, not Armenia, but Karabakh has put under its control Karabakh and 7 adjoining regions of Azerbaijan. So this was about 20% of Azerbaijani territory, and this was going on for many decades. I'm not going to open any secrets. Over the last 15 years, we've been offering our Armenian friends to compromise. So to return five regions to Azerbaijan and leave 2 with them, and that's how they could keep the territorial connection between Armenia and Karabakh. But our Karabakh friends kept saying to us, no, this will create certain threats to us. And we were saying, look, Azerbaijan is growing, economy is developing, this is an oil-producing, gas-producing country, and they've got over 10 million population. Let's compare potential. While we can, while we have this opportunity, we have to find a compromise. We are confident from our side. We will conduct a meeting in UN Security Council, and we can create this natural Lachinsky corridor, and we can guarantee the safety of Armenians living on this territory. And they said, no, we can't agree to this. What are you going to do? We're going to fight. Okay. So ultimately it has come to military confrontation in 2020. I proposed then too to our friends and colleagues. Aliyev, I think, will not be offended, but I'll say that at some point there was an agreement achieved that Azeri military would stop. And honestly speaking, I thought that this was resolved. And I spoke to the Armenian side, and they said no, they have to move back from that part of Karabakh where the Azeriforces were present. And I said, what are you going to do? Again, they said, we're going to fight. I said, listen, in a few days they will come behind your lines. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? We're going to fight. Okay. And everything turned out to be the way it was going to turn out. Ultimately, there was an agreement with Azeris that after Shusha line, the military action will be stopped. There was a corresponding statement signed in November 2020 on halting the military action and introduction of peacekeeping forces. And then the next important point is that the legal status of our peacekeeping forces was based on that statement of November 2020. So there was no status of peacekeepers arising ultimately. So it was pointless to sign this document without Azeri side. They didn't feel any need to sign, but the whole status of these forces was based on this document. And the rights of the peacekeepers was only to keep an eye on the ceasefire. So our peacekeepers did not have any other rights and do not have any other rights. Only witnessing or overseeing the ceasefire. And that's it. And this unstable situation continued for a while. And now, the respectable Mr. Michel in Prague, in the autumn of 2022, and with oversight of Mr. Michel and President Macron and Scholz, leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan got together and they signed a statement out of which flowed the fact that Armenia has recognized Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan Republic. Moreover, the heads of delegation, Armenian delegation, they directly called the territory of Azerbaijan, stated it in square kilometers, which included Karabakh, and they emphasized, they recognized sovereignty of Azerbaijan, on the territory of the Azerbaijani Soviet Republic, and Karabakh was part of Azerbaijan at the time. So, in essence, there was a key question that was a question about status of the Karabakh. When Karabakh announced its independence, nobody recognized its independence, including Armenia, which was strange to me, but they did not recognize the independence of Karabakh. But then in Prague, they recognized that Karabakh belonged to Azerbaijan. And then at the beginning of 2023, they repeated the same thing at a similar meeting in Brussels, just between us. Well, maybe between us is a strong word. We weren't told about this. I knew about this from the press. And Azerbaijan always believed that Karabakh was part of their territory. But having established the status of Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan, Armenia has changed, in essence, its position. And after the meeting, President Aliyev came to me and said, look, see, everyone recognize the fact that Karabakh is ours, and your peacekeepers are on our territory. So even the status of our peacekeepers has changed after it's been recognized that Karabakh is part of Azerbaijan. Your military is on our territory, he said. Let's negotiate the status on bilaterally now. And Pashinyan confirmed, he said, yes, now you have bilaterally to agree the status of this military. So Karabakh was gone. Whatever you say about this, this was the key issue, the status of Karabakh. Everything was circulating around this question over the last decade, and it was resolved by Armenia. Karabakh passed on to Azerbaijan, and so this was the state. This is the position of Armenian state. What do we have to do with this? What can we do? Everything that happened in the last couple of weeks, and cutting off this Legends corridor, all of that was inevitable after sovereignty of Azerbaijan was over this region was recognized. It was just a question of time. It was just a question of time when Azerbaijan was going to re-establish constitutional order there as part of their state. How can you react to this? How else can you react to this? Armenia recognizes. What do we have to say? Do we say we don't recognize it? This would be nonsense. So I think it would be incorrect for me to talk about the nuance of our conversations. But what happened in recent days or recent weeks This was inevitable. This was a consequence of what had been done in Prague and Brussels. So Mr. Michel and his colleagues needed to think when they were trying to persuade them. I don't know whether they were trying to persuade them. When it looks like they did, when they were trying to persuade Pashinyan to take that step, they should have thought altogether about the fate of Armenians in Karabakh. Maybe at least they could write something down, what is expecting them in this situation. Maybe some order of integrating Karabakh into Azerbaijani state. Maybe some order of establishing or ensuring their rights and so on, or safety. Nothing is of that nature is included. It just says that Karabakh is part of Azerbaijan. What are we supposed to do if Armenians decided that themselves? We've used everything that we had in terms of legal means in order to ensure humanitarian part of this. You know that our people died there. They were protecting the Armenians of Karabakh, our peacekeepers. And we were providing humanitarian support, medical support. We were ensuring their exit from there. And if we come back to our European so-called colleagues, maybe they should send some humanitarian aid, to help these poor people who had to exit their lands from Karabakh. Maybe they'll do this, but generally we have to think about the long-term fate of these people. Is Russia ready to support these people? We were supporting them. We had people dying there for protecting, covering them, and ensuring humanitarian support. You see that the refugees came to the camps of our military peacekeepers there. Women and children mainly. They came to get protection. And of course, Armenia is still our ally. There are certain humanitarian issues, and of course, we are prepared to discuss them, and we're prepared to provide support and help to these people. But I've just explained to you how these events developed in brief. This is the essence. Another nuance in this relation, those who were managing things are being removed now by Armenian state. Vardanyan, for example, one of those who is well known in Russia, he refused the citizenship. Can we call upon Azerbaijan to have some humanitarian approach to this? He kept ensuring me that he would ensure security and rights of Armenian population of Karabakh. But now there are no longer Armenians there. They just left there. It's maybe 1,000, 1,500 people. They just left. There's no Armenian population left in Karabakh. As for previous heads of these regions, I don't have to see them in Yerevan especially, but I'm hoping that the heads of Azerbaijan, when all these issues of territorial integrity have been resolved for the country, I'm hoping that they will take a humanitarian approach, a very human approach. Colleagues, please. Any questions, please? Those who want to ask any questions. Eventually, one of our veterans at the forum. Thank you very much. Eventually. Dear Mr. President, I am very happy to see you once again. Conference is devoted to the October. A conference will be taking place in Beijing, and it's it's about the initiative of Eurasian cooperation. And it will follow from certain agreements that you have, or principles that you outlined with Chairman Xi. We have come back to this topic many times, and some people are trying to sow a seed of doubt that our project of Eurasian cooperation and this one belt, one way, maybe these are conflicting projects. These are not conflicting projects. No, it's the opposite. We believe that one project is supplementing the other. What is happening in relation to China and Russia, and maybe this has got to do more with Russia, and with China, this was happening long before the events in Ukraine, where certain partners started to introduce various sanctions, and at some point this was just turning into some trade war between China and the US, and they affected the logistics. We are interested in creating new logistical routes, and China is also interested in it. We see that the trade volume is growing. We're talking about...
आप भी डिजिट को चुनें, सर्च करें डिजिट बाइक इंश्योरेंस और अपनी बाइक इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी तुरंत रिन्यू करें।